The sun had barely crested over the sprawling Connecticut estate when Robert Montgomery stood frozen on the terrace of his mansion, coffee cup trembling in his hand. Below, in the private garden he'd rarely visited since the accident, a scene unfolded that shattered every illusion he'd constructed about control, about legacy, about fatherhood. There, kneeling on the stone path between budding rose bushes, was a black man in worn jeans and a faded work shirt, spoon-feeding his blind daughter. His hands were thick, calloused, and weather-worn, yet they moved with a tenderness that made Robert's throat close. "One more bite, little Lahi," the man. Robert's mind reeled as he paced the mansion's grand study, the walls suddenly claustrophobic. The man he had allowed into his daughter's life, the man whose hands had planted roses and fed Charlotte soup, was not just a grieving father. He was something more, something dangerous, perhaps. Or was he exactly what Robert himself should have been? When Charlotte was finally asleep, Robert entered the study to find Marcus already waiting, a thick folder on the polished oak desk between them. "I believe you've already received similar information," Marcus began. His voice was measured, but a storm churned beneath it. "I sent that file. I needed to know if you were alert enough to understand what's happening." Robert's jaw tensed. "You used my daughter to get to me?" "I didn't use her," Marcus shot back, eyes flashing. "I approached her because she reminded me of my Zoe, and because no child should go through what our daughters did." He opened the folder and slid it across the desk. Robert flipped through medical records, photos, internal hospital memos, all damning, all implicating Dr. Arthur Bennett in a pattern of medical fraud. He's not just incompetent. He's experimenting, misdiagnosing, using children as data points in unapproved protocols. He misdiagnosed Zoe. She didn't have terminal leukemia. She had a treatable condition. And Charlotte, she's not permanently blind. Robert froze. "What are you saying?" Marcus leaned in. "I contacted Dr. Elisa Winters. She's a neuro-ophthalmologist at a private clinic in Boston. She reviewed Charlotte's MRIs. There's damage, yes, but not total destruction of the optic nerve. Her vision can be restored if we move fast." Robert's world tilted sideways. The doctor who had damned his daughter to a life of darkness had also taken Marcus's child from him. This was no coincidence. This was a conspiracy. And Marcus had walked right into his home, not to harm them, but to save what he could from the ashes. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Robert whispered. Marcus's bitter laugh was short. "I did. I filed complaints. I shouted into a void. The system protects itself. Bennett has friends in high places, legal, medical, even political. I needed more than noise. I needed reach. I needed someone like you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Robert looked at the man across from him, the man he had judged, resented, feared, and now trusted. "We're taking her to Winters tomorrow." And so they did. Under the guise of a family outing, Robert, Charlotte, and Marcus drove to the discreet Boston clinic. Dr. Winters ran test after test, scanning every inch of Charlotte's brain and eyes with state-of-the-art equipment. At last, she emerged with a cautious smile. "There's trauma, yes, but there's also hope. With the right procedure and intensive therapy, Charlotte has a strong chance of regaining partial, if not full, vision." Charlotte, unaware of the stakes, clapped when Marcus described the garden in Boston as smelling like adventure. But Robert wasn't smiling. He was burning. That night, he called his legal team, his PR consultants, his most trusted investigators. He ordered a full sweep of Bennett's finances, associations, history. He activated every weapon at his disposal, not for profit, but for revenge, for justice. Marcus provided the names of other families, others whose children had suffered under Bennett's hands. Within days, the conspiracy web grew. 32 families, 3 hospitals, 5 suppressed malpractice cases. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was nuclear. And then came the second anonymous envelope. This time, it contained internal memos from Bennett's Research Foundation, implicating senior hospital administrators in a coordinated cover-up. Names, dates, dollar amounts. Robert knew the window was closing. Bennett was preparing to launch a new phase of trials. More children were at risk. This wasn't just a revenge story anymore. It was a rescue mission. But time was short, because if Bennett even suspected they were onto him. "He buried my daughter," Marcus said, voice ragged, "after I confronted him. She had a sudden complication, 2 days after I filed a complaint. I couldn't prove anything, but I knew. And now I won't let him touch another child." Robert clenched his fist. He won't. In the weeks that followed, a quiet storm swept through the medical world. Journalists received anonymous tips, regulators were alerted, court orders were prepared. Then one gray morning, everything detonated. Federal agents stormed Bennett's office. News cameras rolled as the man in the pristine white coat was led out in handcuffs, his mask of compassion finally stripped. Behind him, a media frenzy erupted. Robert Montgomery and Marcus Johnson stood side by side at the courthouse steps, Charlotte between them, her small hand gripping both of theirs. "This is just the beginning," the prosecutor announced. "Over 40 children misdiagnosed, untold damage, but now the truth comes to light." Reporters swarmed. "Mr. Montgomery, how did you uncover this?" Robert met Marcus's eyes before answering. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "it takes a man who's lost everything to help another man see what really matters." 3 months later, a quiet ceremony unfolded in a newly built center just outside the city. The Zoe Foundation opened its doors, a medical facility built with Montgomery's resources, designed by Marcus and led by Dr. Winters. It was already treating 15 children misdiagnosed by Bennett. Charlotte, her vision improving each week, became the foundation's face. Her story sparked national awareness, pushing families to demand second opinions, to question authority, to hope again. Meanwhile, Bennett's empire collapsed. His allies were indicted. Hospitals once complicit faced lawsuits in the millions. For every wall he had built to protect himself, truth now tore it down. Montgomery Construction rebranded. 30% of its annual profits were now pledged to children's hospitals and medical research. Robert no longer sat in glass towers above the world. He walked hospital halls. He read bedtime stories. He lived. One afternoon in the foundation garden, Marcus stood quietly beneath the blooming apple tree. "She'd be 11 today," he said softly. Robert nodded, emotion thick in his throat. "Do you think we did her justice?" Marcus didn't speak at first. Then, with tears in his eyes, he answered, "Revenge is about making someone hurt. Justice is about making sure the hurt ends with us." The garden was full of laughter. Children running, doctors smiling, parents crying happy tears. Robert watched his daughter, no longer a ghost, but a light. And he understood finally what Marcus had tried to teach him all along. There is a blindness worse than the one behind our eyes. It's the kind we carry in our hearts when we let pride, fear, or guilt keep us from the people we love. Now he could see. On the foundation's main wall, beneath a plaque of brushed steel, were simple words. "In memory of Zoe Johnson, who taught us to see beyond appearances." And beneath that, in smaller letters, "Justice is not given, it is built, brick by brick, heart by heart." The days after the courtroom collapse of Dr. Bennett's empire blurred into a surreal sequence of headlines, press conferences, and stunned outrage from a nation unready to confront how deeply a trusted institution had betrayed its most vulnerable. But for Robert Montgomery, the public reckoning was just the surface. The true earthquake was internal. He found himself waking up at 5 a.m. not to check stock indexes or foreign real estate portfolios, but to sit by Charlotte's bed and watch her stir awake. To listen to her ask, "Is it sunny?" and reply, "Let's go check together." To walk slowly with her in the garden, narrating colors, just like Marcus once had. He had thought wealth could insulate him from pain. Instead, it had kept him blind to it. Sometimes at night, he would stand outside Charlotte's room, listening to the quiet hum of her music, the same piano she once abandoned. She had returned to it slowly, tentatively, coaxed by Marcus and by the hope that she might one day see her fingers dancing across the keys again. In the early mornings, he and Marcus would meet at the foundation's construction site, blueprint rolls under their arms, thermoses of coffee in hand. It had become a ritual, a rhythm neither man had ever expected. "I used to hate the silence," Marcus admitted one morning, watching workers raise the framework of what would be the children's rehabilitation wing. "After Zoe passed, the quiet was like a scream. I filled it with bricks, with sawdust, with sweat. I didn't know what else to do with the ache." Robert nodded. "I filled mine with profit and lawsuits and travel, anything not to feel like I'd failed her." Marcus glanced at him. "But we both ended up in the same place." Robert looked across the yard where Charlotte was helping a younger boy identify plants by scent. Her smile was sunlight. "No," he said. "You got here by walking through the fire. I came because you pulled me out of it." Marcus didn't reply. He didn't need to. A few weeks later, they received a letter in the mail, handwritten, folded with care. It was from the parents of Emma Wilson, a girl recently admitted to the Zoe Foundation. The letter detailed how they had once resigned themselves to Emma's irreversible diagnosis. They'd sold their car to afford her treatment. They'd been told there was no hope. And then they'd seen Charlotte on TV. "Your daughter gave our daughter back her future, and your fight gave us back our courage," the letter read. Enclosed was a photo of Emma holding a sunflower, her eyes, once clouded, now alert, curious, reaching for the light. Robert cried for the first time in 20 years. Not because he was broken, but because something in him had finally begun to heal. Later that week, as they stood beneath the completed foundation sign, Robert handed Marcus a key. "It's yours too," he said. "Your name should be on the board, not as a figurehead, as a partner." Marcus hesitated. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." For once, Marcus didn't protest. He simply took the key, closed his hand around it, and nodded. That summer, the foundation hosted its first official family gathering. The garden bloomed in a riot of color: roses, marigolds, wild lavender. Charlotte, wearing a sun hat too big for her head, ran between guests, handing out lemonade, her steps increasingly confident. Her sight hadn't fully returned, but what she could see now gave her wings. "I can see colors when the light hits them just right," she whispered to Marcus that afternoon, "like ghosts of rainbows." He smiled, blinking back tears. "That's how Zoe used to describe it too." Charlotte squeezed his hand. "I think she visits this garden." "I know she does." Nearby, Robert spoke to a group of parents whose children were undergoing treatment. "You're not just fighting for your kids. You're fighting against silence, against fear, against those who told you no. This place isn't about miracles. It's about second chances and people who refuse to let darkness win. Applause broke out, but Robert's eyes were already searching the crowd, for Charlotte, for Marcus, for a piece of himself he thought was gone forever. That evening, as golden light spilled over the lawn, Charlotte pulled her father aside. "Daddy," she said quietly, "I need to ask you something." He crouched beside her. "Anything." "You didn't stop loving me when I went blind, right?" Robert's breath caught. "No, baby," he said, voice thick. "I loved you so much I didn't know how to look at you without falling apart. But I'm here now, and I'll never look away again." Charlotte nodded once, firmly. "Good. Because I'm going to play a song for Zoe." She ran to the piano set under the oak tree, the notes drifting into the twilight. Every parent grew silent, every doctor paused. And as the music wrapped around them, Robert turned to Marcus. "Do you think she can feel it?" he asked. Marcus didn't need to answer, because they both knew. The dead don't ask for vengeance. They ask for peace. And in that moment, Zoe had it. The trial of Dr. Arthur Bennett began on a crisp autumn morning, the air outside the courthouse thin and biting. A throng of reporters, protesters, and bereaved families had gathered, creating a wall of noise as Bennett arrived under heavy escort, his once pristine image shredded beyond repair. Inside the courtroom, however, the tension was suffocatingly quiet. As the prosecution unveiled its evidence, files, testimonies, whistleblower memos, forensic financial trails, the portrait of a man once hailed as a pioneer in pediatric neurology dissolved into something monstrous. Bennett had not merely made mistakes, he had manipulated diagnoses, altered records, buried second opinions. In pursuit of experimental prestige and funding, he had sacrificed lives, children's lives.